California role in the exportation of gun bans. CD Chuck Michael joins us now, senior partner at Michael and Associates and president of California Rifle and Pistol Association. Come on up. Welcome. Oh, you have your clock. You have your clock in front of you, right? It's 45 seconds. Start to wrap up. 30 minutes. Oh, you as long as you need. Okay, cool. Have at it.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to the People's Republic of California. I first want to start by thanking Alan and all the folks at SAF for this year and all the other years that they've done the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I'm glad that they did it in California. California is a leading battleground state when it comes to fighting against our gun rights and our right to choose to own a gun to defend our families or for sport. And for 150 years, CRPA has been pushing back against that, fighting for the right to make that choice. But on behalf of CRPA and also my law firm, Michel and Associates, and the Second Amendment Law Center, which is something I want everybody to make sure everybody knows about, I want to thank Alan and SAF for putting this on and inviting me and my associate Costas to speak. He'll be up after me. And to get some information to you guys that should help you out. We have a full-time state legislative advocate in Sacramento, Rick Travis. He's here somewhere. He'll be out in the hallway at the booth at the CRPA's table on breaks. I encourage you to go talk to him. And also, make sure you grab a copy of the CRPA's magazine. There's a litigation report, a legislative update report, and a local action report in here. You see all the things that CRPA is doing in California. Not to mention the cover story, which is the assault weapon case from Maryland. Maryland or Massachusetts? Thank you. That's now asking the Supreme Court to hear it. And there's 9 states with semi-auto bans that any one state, if it gets struck down in any one state, it'll help us in California, even though we were already fighting the semi-auto bans in California. And then last but not least, let me make sure that you guys know that I have a book out with my partner, Matt Cubero, California Gun Laws. I can't wait till this turns into a little brochure because right now it's 600 pages. It's a labor of love, but it's easier for me, believe it or not. I get so many, gun laws in California are so confusing. We get questions, phone calls, asking questions about things every day. And it was easier to spend all the time trying to put it together in this so I can just give them or sell them a book than have to spend all the time answering these questions, because that's how confusing the gun laws are. The legacy of most California gun laws is not public safety, it's accidental criminals who broke the law because it's so difficult to follow. Dan Lundgren, former Attorney General, once said, California's gun laws are more complicated than our tax and environmental laws. But tax and environmental laws, you typically have a lawyer on retainer, a compliance counsel on retainer who helps you figure out what your obligations are. Gun owners, the average guy, you don't have a gun lawyer sit in your closet at home, get ready to give you advice on what you have to do to not break the law. That's how confusing it is. So today I'm going to talk about sort of the evolution of gun laws in California and how they did become an exporting state of sort of the petri dish of bad ideas in the California laboratory. But let me say one thing before I move on. One of the great things that's come out of some of the Supreme Court rulings and the blue resistance to that, the pushback against Bruen, the twisting by courts and state attorneys general to try and turn Bruen into something that it never was and make it say something that it never said, is that all the gun rights groups now are working more closely together than they ever have before. That includes Second Amendment Foundation, CRPA, Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners of California, FPC, Second Amendment Law Center, which I mentioned, and forgive me, there's a number of other groups that are all really communicating more than we ever have before, and that's a good thing. And the NRA is, it's coming back, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that NRA and CRPA did together for 25 years in California, but I think I have a lot of hope. I've talked to the folks at NRA and the new leadership, and I think I have a lot of hope that they're going to rise from the ashes and be back in the game full-fledged. So I'm going to start in 1993. I'm going to give you the context of how the gun ban advocacy groups have kind of grown in California. Then I'm going to jump back to 1923 and then to 1982 and kind of hit some highlights. I joined the movement in 1993. I was working at a large firm downtown, and I made a lot of money representing oil companies, but I didn't particularly enjoy it, so I started my own firm, which has since morphed into Michel and Associates with all the lawyers that we have. And then coincidentally, about the same time, tragically, a gunman went into a law firm in San Francisco, Pettit and Martin, and killed 8 people, lawyers and clients and some others. And there's a great book about that I co-wrote with David Frankel on Amazon. It's called Coming to Terms, about the evolution, what came out of that law firm shooting. And what came out of it was the San Francisco Bar Association, all of the lawyers that are members of the San Francisco Bar, came together and created something called the Legal Community Against Violence. Now, the San Francisco Bar and the LA County Bar and the American Bar Association, they've all been left-leaning forever, and they've all been basically anti-gun owner. But they got organized after this, and they created that group. And that group is what really kind of changed the game in California. So hold that thought. We're going to jump back to 1923 when the Sullivan Act was being passed. And California's concealed carry laws evolved. Now, I'm sure everybody here knows what good cause, what the nightmare good cause was, and the fights that we had over that, and how that all changed after Bruin, and now they're trying new things to delay and increase the costs and stop people from being able to get concealed carry permits. But in 1923, we actually considered it a victory when we did not adopt the Sullivan Law. We adopted what became the good cause law for CCWs. The fight back then was over handguns, primarily. And so they wanted to ban handguns and restrict being able to take them out in public. And in 1982, they actually launched, and remember at that time, the Brady Center was called Handgun Control. In 1982, they launched Prop 15, which would have banned the civilian possession of handguns in the state of California. It was a ballot measure. And SAF was involved in opposing that, GOA, GOC, NRA, everybody came together and fought that ballot proposal, and we won. We stopped them from banning handguns. They sort of turned their attention to semi-autos because California in 1989 passed the first version of its Assault Weapon Control Act after the Stockton schoolyard shootings. Interestingly enough, it didn't ban the SKS that shooter used in those shootings because it was so confused about what it was trying to ban and what it wasn't banning, trying to figure out what an assault weapon actually is, that they missed a lot. And so it's been modified 4 times since then to try and encompass more and more and more. And there are obviously several challenges going on in court to that law. Okay, now coming back to 1993, the LCAV is formed. The San Francisco Bar Association gets very involved. A lot of other lawyers at a lot of other law firms get very involved. And one of their at this point, the Sacramento legislature was not in the pockets of the progressive liberal Democrats. You could actually still stop some things. So they took a different strategy. They went, and this was before Heller and all the cases that came after at the Supreme Court. And so we didn't really have the ironclad Second Amendment as an individual right case law at that point in time. So what we had was preemption, which is that the state laws conflict, so local cities can't do different things that conflict with state laws. So the LCAV lawyers came up with this creative argument to get around preemption, and they went out and started what they called the Local Ordinance Project, where they went to city by city and tried to push different local ordinances. The primary sort of centerpiece of that purpose of that initiative initially was the Saturday night special ban, which was still going along with their efforts to try and ban more and more handguns in more and more places. So in response to that, NRA and CRPA got together and created a number of different programs, including a hunting and conservation program, a state legislative council program, a range protection and development program, and a local ordinance project of our own. And we've pushed back against all these local ordinances that LCAV was pushing these out. This is not like somebody hears about it and they call LCAV and get it. These guys are actively pushing these initiatives throughout California, these local ordinances, to try and make it, part of the effort is, along with what they're doing with one particular law, is to just make it so confusing that you got to buy a 600-page book to try and figure out what applies in your jurisdiction, and making it different in every municipality just goes right along with their game plan, which is to murder the gun culture by making it impossible to buy a gun, making it less places where you can have a gun, less people that qualify to buy a gun, making it as expensive as possible to get a CCW or a gun or ammo. All of this is banning gun shows, banning gun ranges, making it impossible to operate one, an FFL or whatever. All of that is part of a concerted effort to eradicate the gun culture, and Newsom has said this on record. But anyway, back to the local ordinance project. So we started suing and started sending out opposition letters. LCAV was ready to get several hundred cities to pass Saturday night special laws and other laws that they were pushing around the time. And we stopped most of them because we sent these opposition letters, and folks got involved locally. We were able to recruit some local folks. And on that line, let me just mention, talk to Rick and the folks at CRPA about their local chapters. We have one in San Diego and throughout the state. You should definitely think about getting involved in those. But so the local folks helped us fight city by city. This became, by the way, the tobacco industry, when they said, when the folks who wanted to ban tobacco said, we're going to go locally, city by city, to ban whatever aspect of smoking we want to ban, the tobacco industry said, we can't fight that, it's too big. CRPA and NRA, through their local ordinance project, actually fought city by city to stop the LCAV's local ordinance project. I don't remember the exact year, early 2000s, Sacramento kind of became under Democrat control. So they really didn't need to push things locally as much anymore because they could get it passed at the state level, so they kind of changed their focus. But LCAV still, it morphed into the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence and then the Gifford Center. It's still up there in San Francisco, and it's still cranking out model gun control laws, and they're not local ordinances anymore. They work very closely with Everytown and Brady Center and all the other gun control advocacy groups to pass as many laws as many states as they can. And it's, again, it's proactive. They're pushing it out. They're not waiting for people to call in and ask for help. They're working with attorneys general across the country and giving them the model briefs. I mean, we see the same arguments, the same brought by the states when we challenge something in any of these states. It's the same kind of thing. This is being coordinated nationally by Everytown. So I guess the point of that is California, between the 1989 Assault Weapon Control Act, the local ordinances, the other gun control laws that California has passed, was definitely a leader in pushing things out across the country and trying to set an example for progressive and liberal states. But I think that's kind of morphed now because of Heller and Bruen and their perceived need, and they're correct, to have an organized opposition to the efforts to use Bruen and Heller to advance our Second Amendment rights. So now we know that Everytown and all the other gun control groups, for example, get on phone calls with the California Department of Justice and talk about what they can do next. Now, we don't know what they're talking about because the last time they did this, they put it in emails, and we did a Public Records Act request and got all their communications and saw their whole game plan, and we used that in Sacramento very helpfully. So now they've wised up. They don't put it in the email. All we get in the emails that we get public records responses for are scheduling the phone calls. But we know they're all talking regularly about what they can push in California. And these are not just folks from California. They're from all across the country. Let me jump to 2005. Again, going along with the theme that they wanted to regulate handguns before they sort of shifted their attention to semi-autos. And you had Proposition H in San Francisco. And again, this was before Heller, just a few years, 3 years before Heller. And so we didn't have the Second Amendment locked in yet. So but Kamala Harris, and I hope you saw this on the news because I think we broke this story, or Costas did, my associate who's going to come up and talk next, where she supported Proposition H, which would have banned the civilian possession of handguns in the city and county of San Francisco. We challenged that in court, and I got to jump back again because this was the second time that San Francisco had tried to do this. First, they did it after the Harvey Milk shooting, and Dianne Feinstein pushed for a handgun ban. And the SAF led the effort, Second Amendment Foundation led the effort to stop that one. And that's where I met Don Cates. Some of you may remember him, my mentor and friend who's since passed on. But he led that case, and they stopped that initial effort by Feinstein to ban handguns. Then they did it again in 2005 because one of the deputy district attorneys at Kamala Harris's district attorney's office came up with a creative argument to get around the preemption argument that had prevailed on Feinstein's attempt. So, but thankfully, we sued and we stopped Proposition H. They did not get to ban handguns in San Francisco. And again, that's part of the reason why I think they've sort of shifted their attention. Handgun control changed its name to Brady Center, and they're not focused so much on banning all handguns. And Kamala Harris is even feigning respect for the right to choose to own a handgun to defend yourself in your home. But still, you've got the California is still the sort of the laboratory, but now it's working together with other groups, and I think every town is kind of leading that effort across the country, and they're going into all the battleground states and trying to push semi-auto bans, magazine capacity bans, ammo purchase restrictions, all the kind of things that you see in California. They're trying to push those to be adopted across the country, and part of the strategy for that is that they want to overwhelm us. They want to get it to the point where, because Bloomberg 10 years ago pledged $800 million to gun control advocacy groups. Who knows how many, it's over $1 billion, I'm certain now, and probably maybe more than one, that he's put into the effort to ban guns. So they assume, and then they spend taxpayer money, so they assume that they can overwhelm us with laws that we can't keep up with the lawsuits. So that's another reason why it's a good thing that all the gun rights groups are working more closely together than they ever have, and that NRA is, Phoenix rising from the ashes, I think, coming back into the game off the sidelines, and will be much more involved as it was for 20 years through all the partnerships that it had with CRPA for lawsuits and for all the programs I mentioned, hunting and legislative and range development. And so forgive me, I didn't have a lot of time to organize this, and I think I might have covered everything. I may finish early. I can't do this. I'm a lawyer. I have to use up all my time and then run. I gotta run long.
Counsel, you have 13 minutes.
Yeah, I got a lot of time here. So what I will do is talk about some of the lawsuits that we are bringing to fight back, and then the Second Amendment Law Center. And unfortunately, I forgot my glasses. But some of the big ones are the Duncan case, which is the magazine capacity limitation law that we got. By the way, everybody take a second and genuflect to St. Benitez, the judge down here in San Diego, who we love so much. Those are making it worse. That's how I felt after 2 Manhattans last night. Okay, so that case had an interesting tortured history. Started with St. Benitez, went up to the Ninth Circuit 3-judge panel, we won. It went up to the en banc panel, we lost 7-4, or 7-5. We took it up to the Supreme Court. This was before Bruin had been ruled on. The Supreme Court held it until they ruled on Bruin, then remanded it back to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit then sent it back down to Judge Benitez. We won again, and he's also struck down semi-auto bans. He struck down the ammunition purchase restrictions in the Rohde case, Kim Rohde, who we should all know and love, the Olympic gold medalist, trap shooter. So we won with Judge Benitez again, and then we were ready to go back to a 3-judge panel, and the en banc court grabbed it. The same en banc panel that we had lost 7-5 with the first time around. And that's now been argued in front of that en banc panel, and we will see what they say, but it's probably headed to the Supreme Court along with or secondary to the Bianchi case, which is now called the Snopes case. So that Duncan case, since it's en banc, it's in sort of the pole position, the first or second place to get to the Supreme Court, and that's the big lesson here. We need to get another ruling from the Supreme Court, because just like the lower courts did in Heller, where they twisted the ruling to try and make it something that it never was, they're trying to do the same thing with Bruin. They're trying to conflate the two-step process into a two-test process and say that magazines are not arms under the right to keep and bear arms, or that gun parts are not arms, or that certain firearms aren't even considered arms, like semi-automatics that are too close to fully automatics, whatever the heck that means. So the Supreme Court said in the Rahimi case that came down that they're going to have to clarify some of these things. So we're very hopeful that, and all of the groups that I mentioned earlier, including SAF and CRPA and Second Amendment Law Center, everybody's jumped in, and I know the Minnesota folks are in the room somewhere. They contributed to that too. Everybody's trying to get the Supreme Court. Usually when when a party asks the Supreme Court to take the case, it's just that one brief. Other people don't try and get the Supreme Court to take the case. They'll weigh in if the Supreme Court does take the case. Then you get all these amicus briefs supporting the case on the merits. But there were half a dozen briefs filed just joining the petitioners in the Bianchi case and asking the Supreme Court to take the case for review. So we'll see what happens. They come back into session the first Monday in October. They will have their conferences and they vote on what cases to take. Depending on when the Ninth Circuit acts and how it acts, and whether we can change two minds to be truthful and faithful to the Bruin ruling, we may win. If not, we will be asking the Supreme Court to take that case again. We've also struck down the roster. We blocked out microstamping in the Bolin case. That's up on appeal. We're still litigating that one. I mentioned the Rhodey case, which Judge Benitez gave us a great ruling on, and that is scheduled for oral argument in December. CRPA v. LA County Sheriff is in litigation in the trial court. We got a big win for non-resident to get CCWs, to get licenses to carry. And now the sheriffs are kind of panicking about how they're going to process that administratively, and I think that's going to result in the Sheriff's Association asking for some positive revisions to the laws on CCW licensing, like knock off the 2-year term, turn it into a 5-year term like every other state, so they don't have to reprocess these applications every 2 years, which they don't want to do. The administrative headache for sheriff's departments or issuing jurisdictions, police chiefs, whatever, they don't want that job. It's like working for the DMV. You know, they would rather be on the streets in patrol cars. We've got May versus Bonda. That's the Attorney General Bonta. That's the one where we knocked out a lot of the sensitive places, but we're not giving up. We're working on more. And remember, you know, they portray this as a gun ban, or a ban on guns in certain areas. Well, it never was a ban on guns in certain areas. You could never have a gun unless it was locked and unloaded in a locked container in those areas to begin with. But you could have one if you had a CCW. And for 100 years, since 1923, if you had a CCW, you could bring it into those areas, and it was never a problem. But the press never picked up on the distinction between a gun ban in a certain zone, gun-free zone, and a CCW invalidation zone. So we're working to make that clear and to get those more sensitive areas opened up to possess firearms so you can defend yourself in those places. We're working with SAF and local council. We're working as local council on a challenge to the FFL excise tax. We knocked out the junior sports, the ban on marketing to minors. That's the junior sports magazines case. We're working to defend gun shows, and we'll probably need to take that to the Supreme Court. And then let me talk about Second Amendment Law Center and tell you what that is. So Second Amendment laws, with all these cases going on across the country, there is a need for a coordinating body to coordinate friend of the court briefs, amicus briefs. And so Second Amendment Law Center, I pulled together some of the leading Second Amendment lawyers across the country, and they're all listed on the website, 2alc.org, to kind of make a pool of lawyers and a pool of amicus parties, potential amicus, whether it's one of the big ones, SAF, GOA, GOC, whatever, GCRPA, whatever, or the smaller groups, Pink Pistols, Operation Blazing Sword, the Minnesota guys, the Colorado guys, various state associations. They can all jump on these amicus briefs, and then we give them template fundraisers that they can set out and try and raise money for to contribute to amicus brief efforts, but also for their general operations, because state associations, and this is another thing that CRPA is doing, state associations really need to become more empowered. Like Colorado wasn't ready for the threat that it had and so, this last year. And CRPA is now working with state associations because we're probably the most highly developed of all the state associations in the country. We've got the administrative roles down, the operations down, the fundraising down, the different programs and how they're administered, shooting programs, training programs. I mean, CRPA is way out ahead. I remember the litigation counsel for the NRA described most state associations as 6 guys at a picnic table with a 6-pack and a bag of chips. That's still what many state associations are, because they're not facing the kind of threats. They didn't have to respond and evolve to the threat that, like we did in California. And CRPA has done that. As NRA kind of stepped to the sidelines, CRPA really had to step in and step up and take over a lot of those functions, and they have. And I thank everybody in the room who is a member of and contributes to the CRPA, because I'm not just a legal advocate, I'm an activist. My wife won't let me work for free, but let me say, the CRPA gets great rates, not like the NRA's paid some of its lawyers, as you probably have heard. So we get a lot, the CRPA gets a lot of bang for the buck. So Second Amendment Law Center, the most recent one we did was the Snope v. Brown. That's the Bianchi case in the Supreme Court, asking them to take that. But we've been involved in Massachusetts, in a case challenging a machine gun ban. This is where sort of the cutting edge argument is, are fully automatics protected by the Second Amendment? They should be, they're bearable arms. Then the question becomes, are they dangerous and unusual? And that's debatable. But this court said they're not protected. They moved it into the first question, which is it an arm under the language keep and bear arms in the Second Amendment? And that's the big battle that we're still having. That's not supposed to be a test. You don't get to say what bearable arms are or are not covered by arms. They all are. Then it's a question of whether there's a historical analog. Hopefully you guys all know what I'm talking about. This is the Bruin two-step test. Historical analog law that is similar to the modern day law that would tell you that the founding fathers would have tolerated the modern day law back in 1791. So when you say a fully automatic firearm is not an arm, you're cheating the whole test and perverting the test, and that's what many courts are doing, which is why the Supreme Court really needs to get involved and fix that. So there's been several others, and they're all listed on the 2ALC website. I encourage everybody to have a look there and support us if you can. Support those amicus efforts. Support all the other groups. You should be a member of all of them. One thing I think the groups have learned, it's not a zero-sum game. If one group gets big contributions, we're working on the honor system. If you get a big contribution and you have more money to support a lawsuit, and the other group is not getting as much, because fundraising is very challenging these days, given the inflation rate. So we're all kind of sharing the resources. So join up, get involved, and stay informed. Sign up at crpa.org for their. You don't need to even join to get their information, which is, knowledge is power. So know what's going on. Talk to Rick Travis out there in the lobby about what's happening in Sacramento. Check out the reports in the magazine. And I'll be around if you have any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chuck.